All right, seems like our numbers keep going up in terms of attendees. So I'm going to go ahead and get started. Good evening, everyone. Thanks so much for joining us today. My name is Cindy Córdova, and I am a Senior Assistant Director within the admissions team here at Boston College. And I want to take the time right now to congratulate you once again on your admission to Boston College through the National College Match for Questbridge. We are so excited to have you. Out of a number of a little bit over 700 or so applications that we received this year, we get to celebrate you as a cohort of 75 students. And again, we couldn't be more proud of you. And we hope that you are also celebrating with your loved ones and with everyone who has supported you along the way. We wanted to come together tonight to welcome you to the BC community and introduce you to some key individuals who are going to be supporting you here at BC. And throughout our time as a partner school, this being our second year as a partner institution for Questbridge, we've learned a lot along the way that you have a lot of questions, in particular questions related to your financial aid awards. And so we wanted to bring the experts from financial aid. We have the Director of Financial Aid, Ebony Marsala, here on the screen, and she has prepared an incredible presentation for you tonight. So we're going to dedicate the majority of this webinar to her presentation. Next, you're going to hear from Ebony Marsala, and after her presentation, you'll be hearing from Tyler Gollin and Jaleigha Dunlap, who are the president and vice president of EagleBridge, which is our Questbridge Scholars Network here at BC, an incredible community that we hope you can join so you can get involved and be an involved Questbridge scholar here on campus. And we also welcome your questions. So the Q&A is going to be active for the duration of this hour. So you can ask any questions that you have related to student life, to classes, to financial aid, to admissions. And my colleagues, Danielle Wells and Lauren Riley, who are very familiar with the Questbridge process here at BC, will be answering those questions. We also have our current students, Joy, Tyler, and Jaleigha also behind the scenes who can answer any student-related questions. And then we have Ebony's team from Financial Aid, Kara, and Melanie, who are also going to be answering your questions related to financial aid. So again, any questions that you have for tonight, add them to the Q&A, and we'll try to get to as many as we can for this hour. This session is being recorded, so you can reference it later on. We'll be in communication with you about how to do that. And we have disabled the chat. So again, please use the Q&A for any questions that you have. And without further ado, I'm going to turn it over to Ebony Marsala for her presentation. Thank you again for joining us.
Thank you so much for having me, and welcome and congratulations to all of you out there. We are so excited, as Cindy mentioned, to have you as a part of the BC community. My team is here to help me answer some questions. And for the sake of full disclosure, I've been at Boston College for 6 months, and part of my decision to come to Boston College was really, it's just such a special community. So I hope that when you're here on campus in the fall, and even as we lead up to that, you can feel that special feeling that BC have, because it's a great institution. But today we're here to talk about financial aid. So I'm going to take myself off the screen and get started. So most of you are familiar with the forms that were needed to start the financial aid process. We require the FAFSA form, which is the Free Application for Federal Student Aid. That is used to determine a student's federal and state financial aid eligibility. The FAFSA form is free, and we do require that it be completed each year. So you will have to continue to fill out the FAFSA from year to year. The CSS profile was the second financial aid form that we required to review your eligibility for financial aid. That form is used in determining the institutional funding eligibility, so the Questbridge scholarship piece. The CSS profile does have a fee, but most students in this current year will qualify for a waiver because the College Board changed their waiver process. The positive news about the CSS profile is it's only required for the first year. So often students can kind of applaud that, because of the two forms, the CSS profile is a little bit more in depth. And so often students are asking, is that something we have to do year after year? And thankfully, no, you do not. It's only required in the first year. So in addition to the FAFSA and the CSS profile, We also require additional documentation. In year one, and many of you are familiar with this, we require the parent and student US or foreign tax returns. If the parent or student is not a tax filer, then completing a non-filer statement will suffice. We also require parent and student W-2 forms, business tax returns if you or your parents own a business, and non-custodial parent taxes and financial information. The easy way to answer that question is if your parents are divorced, never married, separated, it's the parent that is not on the FAFSA form that's considered the non-custodial parent. So those are the additional documents that students need to provide in the first year in order for us to create your financial aid award. In subsequent years, so years 2 through 4, we will require this paperwork again, but instead of filling out the profile, we'll ask for the BC financial aid application. So you'll need to submit the FAFSA, these documents, and the BC aid application in order for us to create a financial aid award in years 2 through 4. Why do we ask for all this information? It's not because we're trying to make this a hard process, but it is imperative for us to kind of collect as much information as possible in order to evaluate the family's ability to pay, what can reasonably be contributed towards the education. The positive news is as a part of this Questbridge program, the parent's institutional contribution is set at 0. And so any contribution we're using to determine your institutional, your Questbridge scholarship amount is so really based off of the student's income and asset information. But we still require you to submit the documents as well as submit that FAFSA form because we also have to calculate the federal eligibility because we're using the FAFSA for federal and the BC app or the CSS profile for the institutional component. For institutional funding, again, this Questbridge scholarship, at a minimum, all students are expected to contribute $2,400 towards their education in year 1. In years 2 through 4, that goes to $2,500. Often students ask why, like why are we expecting students to contribute towards their education? Really, it's kind of a philosophical belief that this is education is for the students. And so there is some thought of that there needs to be kind of contribution from the students. And so that's where that comes from. It's used by most institutions, so the amount varies from school to school, but it is mentioned as a part of the Questbridge program and a part of the process. Obviously, we'll talk a little bit more about, if there are changes in circumstance, et cetera, but that is kind of the baseline. Added to that might be contributions based on assets. If, let's say, students have savings or things like that, your contribution as the student may be higher than that minimum $2,400. Okay, so once we have all the required information, the next step in the process is creating that financial aid award. And so a lot of students and families will ask, well, how is that done? So I'm kind of showing you the behind the scenes of that. This is the formula that allows us to create your financial aid award. This formula is used by kind of every financial aid office across the country. This is like the basis for our process. And it is the cost of attendance, which I'll explain in a few minutes, minus the expected family contribution, or EFC. And that will give you your financial aid eligibility or financial need. So when you contact financial aid officers and they say, this was based on need and all these other kind of buzzwords, that's what it's referring to. The cost of attendance minus the EFC gives you your financial aid eligibility. So your expected family contribution, what is that? That is the number that is derived after completing your financial aid application. So your FAFSA or your profile. Both of them will do kind of an internal calculation using the income information provided, asset information provided to drill everything down to this EFC. It provides a number for your FAFSA and an EFC for your profile. So there are two distinct numbers from each form. Traditionally, the EFC calculated by the profile is almost always different than the EFC used from the FAFSA. And so again, we take that EFC, we subtract it from the cost of attendance, and that helps us determine what federal funds we're going to provide on the FAFSA side, and then the institutional amount on the CSS profile or BC app side. Okay, so that's what the expected family contribution is. The cost of attendance represents this. So a student's cost of attendance is comprised of tuition and fees, room and board, and then books and supplies, travel, and personal expenses. So there's a lot of like color action happening on the slide. Tuition and fees and room and board are what we consider direct or billed expenses. These are the items that you will see when we bill you that first time or bill you from year to year. And this is what, I guess, the true cost, the direct costs of your education are. The tuition and fees can vary from year to year. And so each year the trustees meet to determine that next year's tuition rate. Same with room and board. So those costs will vary. It's the expenses for 1 year. So it's not a cumulative total. It's just taking it 1 year at a time and going from there. The things in yellow are considered non-billed or indirect expenses. These are items that you will not see on your bill. They are not things that we will charge you for. Instead, these are costs associated with attending college, but they may vary per individual. So for our purposes, to be able to even create an award, we use an amount for books and supplies. The travel will vary depending on where the student is from. And we use an amount for personal expenses because students will need to obtain books, supplies. Travel is not, funding your spring break or going on vacation. It really comprises the costs associated with getting from your home to Boston College in the summer, heading back in the winter, and then coming back, and coming back in the spring. So it only really covers the 9 months. Your cost of attendance is for the 9 months that you're in school. It doesn't really look at the summertime or periods outside. It doesn't really look at the winter break. That's kind of outside of the academic term. So it's about the cost of attendance is for 9 months, and this is what it is comprised of. Okay, so just kind of keeping that color coding moving forward to this example. The final cost of attendance, I think I mentioned this earlier, will not be determined until spring 2022. So in order to create your awards that we provided you for the Questbridge program, we had to use the cost of attendance from the 21-22 year, this current year. And so these numbers are the current tuition, room and board, and the personal books expenses, et cetera, that were used as a part of creating your award. When the final numbers are determined for tuition and fees and room and board, we will make an adjustment to your financial aid package to reflect the changes in tuition fees, room and board. So that will happen later in the spring. All those things are totaled, and so you can see that kind of 80,603. This amount will vary because, as I mentioned, it depends on where the student is from. So the amount we put in for travel varies on the location of the student. So each student's cost of attendance will be different, and therefore every student's Questbridge award will be different. It'll be different not only because the cost of attendance is different for each person, but also the EFC is different for students. And so ultimately your financial need will be different. So there is no set Questbridge award. It really is unique to the individual student and will vary from year to year because, again, you're filling out your FAFSA from year to year. So in addition to the tuition fees, room and board that will be charged on the bill, I do want to highlight that schools in Massachusetts require all students to have comparable comprehensive health insurance coverage for the year. And so the specific details of what your health insurance has to provide is available on our website. If your health insurance will cover you while you're in Massachusetts, students have the option to waive our school-based health insurance. However, it is important to note that if you're unable to waive it, then there will be an additional cost. This year, the cost of health insurance was $35.35. And so it's important to keep that in mind when you're talking about or thinking about costs, because As we talked about when we go back here, in addition to the direct build cost, some students may need to take our health insurance. So that will be an added cost on top of those pink things, okay? And I want to use this time to highlight for those students, many of the students in the Questbridge program qualify for a program here at Boston College known as the Montserrat Program. And so I just want to highlight that group because it's a great team of people. It's led by Yvonne McBarnett, and she is lovingly called Miss Smiley. So that gives you a little hint at her disposition. She's just super sweet and nice. She works with Jeremiah Jefferson, who used to work in financial aid and now works for Montserrat. Montserrat's mission is to provide students with access and support to all areas of student life not incorporated in the financial aid package. They provide social, intellectual, spiritual, and supportive assistance. And that includes things like the Athletic Gold Pass, tickets to campus events. They have tutoring, a laptop lending. They have book assistance. So they have like a lending library where students can go and borrow their books from the Montserrat Coalition to use for their courses and return it at the end of the term. So they're a great resource. They have some fun things like the Montserrat Dinner Club and mentoring. So I can't say enough positive things about Montserrat, but for those of you out there that have a concern about some of these kind of non-billed indirect expenses, Montserrat is definitely there to support and help you with those costs. So once you're here on campus, I encourage everyone to just drop on by. They're great. We have a clothing drive in the winter where we have coats. It's just wonderful. And I've worked at other institutions and I've just never seen such a supportive network like here at Boston College. So that's my little plug for Montserrat. But anyway, going back to the health insurance, we've covered the cost for that. And so now we're going to go into working through kind of a real-time example. If you're trying to figure out what are your specific costs and you have your financial aid award, how would you accomplish that? So as a reminder, your financial aid was determined based on the cost of attendance minus the EFC. That gives you your financial need. This is the formula that allows us to create your financial aid package, but that does not necessarily give you any clue of what, if any, out-of-pocket costs you will have. So in order to do that, you really need to take your billed costs, what we will actually bill you for. So again, tuition and fees, as well as room and board. In this example, it totals $77,553. And then from that, you want to subtract your financial aid award, these key components. So the institutional grants or scholarships, federal or state grants, and it's like Pell and SEOG, and if applicable, state grants. The important thing to note is as a part of the Questbridge program, we do not award students with loans. However, students are able to use loans to help finance their out-of-pocket costs. So we'll work through also the federal work-study program. It is an on-campus job opportunity, but that is not subtracted off the bill. So in my example, I did not list work-study because work-study is not something that gets subtracted off the bill. It is a great opportunity for students, and I'll talk a little bit more about work-study later in the presentation, but it does not come out for your out-of-pocket costs. You're not packaged with loans. And for every Questbridge student that's part of the second cohort, as Cindy mentioned, we learned so much from the first cohort that we really felt it was vital to provide kind of individualized information about your actual out-of-pocket costs. So later in the spring, once we finalize the tuition and fees, room and board costs, we will be sending an individualized cost estimate to each student. The reason why it will still be an estimate is there are kind of other things that you may be billed for. Again, we won't know whether or not you'll be taking the health insurance. You know, there are some things we still won't know, but it'll at least give you an idea of kind of what your cost will be. But for the purposes of tonight, I have an example here. Again, when we talked about the direct costs, total $77,553. So this is just an example award. This does not mean that this is your award. It may look very different, but from that total cost, we are taking the BC scholarship amount the SEOG, which is a federal grant, and the Pell Grant. This example student, this was their award as a part of the Questbridge program. And so this student's out-of-pocket costs, we're assuming they are not taking the health insurance in this example, their out-of-pocket cost is $2,008. And so that's how you make that determination of what it is you will have to pay. So often students ask the question, well, what does my award cover? What does it cover? I think it's just important to look at it in a different way. Again, it's looking at what your total cost will be from that billed expenses framework and subtracting out the financial aid pieces. Okay, so now the next obvious question is, well, how do I pay that? How will I pay that $2,008? There's a variety of options. The first would be direct payments or a payment plan option. Some families pursue this because they want to divide those costs over time. And we have a variety of options as it relates to payment plans. Typically, there are due dates and deadlines associated with signing up for them, but it allows you to divide your payments evenly. The beauty of our payment plans is if you should have some other charges like fees that we weren't expecting, or maybe a lost library book, I don't know, you're able to adjust your payment plan to incorporate those other costs. So it really is a great tool to help finance any kind of out-of-pocket costs. In addition to that, students may be eligible or may receive outside scholarships. I'm really happy that this webinar is happening kind of so early in the year because it's not too late. As high school seniors, there's plenty of money out there for students that are graduating. I always encourage students to look within their community. There are, typically civic organizations, perhaps your parents or relatives, employers, a variety of places that offer scholarships to college-bound students. So I encourage everyone to look within their community, look at national scholarship programs, but the time is now. A lot of deadlines are passing or about to kind of be due. And so you'd want to kind of put some time into that. I also always encourage students, while the big ticket ones are great, look at some smaller ones because those can add up and there's typically less competition for smaller ones. So thinking about $500 there, $1,000 here, because those add up. And if you get a few of them, that'll help not only with any potential out-of-pocket costs you may have, but if you get enough of them, they may help with some of those indirect costs, like helping with books or helping with your personal expenses, et cetera. So that's another means of financing the out-of-pocket cost. And the last option, which is a very valid option. I know that there's a lot of students that are a little bit worried about debt. We hear a lot about it in the news and they talk about a national debt crisis and things of that nature. The beauty of the Questbridge program is that students are not initially packaged with a loan, so you still have the opportunity to use your federal loan eligibility. As a first-year student, you're eligible. Most students will be eligible for about $3,500 in the subsidized loan, or a total of $5,500 from the direct loan program for the first year. And each year they set a new limit. So there's a different limit for your sophomore year and another one for your junior year. That is usually one of the easiest ways to help finance some of those out-of-pocket costs. And in the example that was given, let's say this student qualified for that $3,500 and they have an out-of-pocket of $2,000, they can take a little bit more to help finance other expenses, not necessarily on their bill. And I always just encourage students, again, debt is fact of life, and I'm not a loan pusher by any means, but it is a fact of life for a lot of students. The reasonable option are those federal loans. They have very reasonable interest rates. You don't go into repayment until after graduation. Typically, when they're talking about kind of this loan debt crisis, they're usually referring to sometimes loans outside of that federal realm and kind of in excess of the actual cost. So some students are using them for sometimes off-campus living or things, and maybe they're not budgeting well to kind of live like a student, I think is kind of the language we use. So don't be too scared of loans, but at the same time, you want to borrow responsibly. So you definitely only want to borrow what you need if you have to. And then there are also parent loan options if you have parents in your life that wish to borrow in lieu of you borrowing and or in addition to. So those are kind of the options to help with financing those out-of-pocket expenses. So next steps. So we've talked about the aid application process. We've talked about how your award is created. We've talked about figuring out what your costs will be. So what should happen next? For those students, and I mentioned this earlier, if your family is having a change in their financial circumstances, if there's been a loss of income, change in situation, that could be your parents have divorced or separated since the information provided on the FAFSA and profile, or there's been some unusual expense, be it because of a natural disaster or some other unfortunate circumstance. We do have a process where students can request to have their financial aid award reviewed. I would like to point out that requesting an appeal does not necessarily mean that you will see a change in your financial aid. It does not mean that the award will increase. It just means that you're reaching out to our office to kind of mention what this change is and talking with your financial aid counselor about whether or not this is something that can be considered. That's the first step if you think you have a special circumstance. We have a team of financial aid counselors, and 2 of them are with me tonight that are here to help you. And so the caseloads are divided by alphabet. And so I encourage everyone, if you're having any type of situation, or if you just want to talk with us, that's kind of why we're here. And I know that often financial aid can seem kind of like a scary thing and a scary place, but we are very nice people here in the financial aid office, and we are here to help. And so that leads into kind of my next slide of things to consider. Don't be afraid to ask questions or advocate for yourself and your family with the financial aid office. We use the information on the financial aid forms to create your financial aid package, but that is just a snapshot. Many of you that have already gone through the process know that it was a snapshot based on 2020, and a lot has happened since then. You know, we've been living through a pandemic for the past 2 years. And so it's important that if there is a circumstance or situation that you're speaking up and you're not afraid to speak up, because again, that's why we're here. So reaching out to your financial aid counselor is more than acceptable, and it's appreciated because we need to know more about you as the individual person, kind of more than the numbers on the form. So don't be afraid to ask questions, even if it's outside of the financial aid area. Just ask questions. There are so many resources available to students as a part of the BC community. And often some students are unaware because they just don't want to ask that question. From a kind of personal note, I graduated from a high school where my total school was about 2,000 students. And I went to a state college where there are about 20,000 students. So I felt like such a small fish in a big pond when I went to college all these many years ago. But it took me some time to learn that you can ask questions. So my first year, I didn't really ask questions. My first year didn't go so well. Do not follow after me. But I learned afterwards that the people who work at the college, the other students, they're there to help. And again, you'll hear from the students kind of in our first cohort. So don't be afraid to ask questions. Also very important, please do not ignore the communications from our office or really any office or any follow-up questions we may have. All students are able to check the status of their financial aid online. And you should do so regularly, not only this year, but in future years. You'll be able to log in and see what, if any, documents are requested or required of you. I will highlight that over the summer, we will ask for 2 additional forms in addition to what you've already provided. For students that indicated that there was more than one in your family in college, we're going to require a sibling enrollment verification form that needs to be completed by your sibling's college. And then we also have an incoming student verification form that will need to be completed as well. And traditionally, we start requesting them later in the spring. So that will update. We will typically notify students, but I just wanted to give you the heads up that that is something that will be needed later in the summer before we start in the fall. And so I did say that I would talk a little bit about work study. I encourage everyone to use their work study funds. Again, when I was in college, I didn't qualify for work study, and I was always so sad that I didn't. But work study, again, is an on-campus job that can help you pay for some of your kind of real-time expenses, your personal travel costs. Like if, let's say, you want to head home for Thanksgiving, you can use your work study earnings for that. The work study funds are paid directly to you, the student. The pay for work study is quite good. I think right now it's at $14 an hour, moving up to $15 an hour, perhaps in the fall of 22. So it's a very good pay rate. The maximum hours that you can work per week for work study is 20. So it's not something where you'll be working more than going to class. And studies show that having a part-time job is helpful because it helps with time management. I worked kind of all through my college, and even though I didn't qualify for work study, I worked in my campus dining hall, which I know some students are like, ew, but it was wonderful. And here at BC, again, I'll give a plug for our dining services. They hire students, and you get a free meal if you work in dining services, which is amazing because who doesn't like free food? But also it's, again, a good opportunity. But the other benefit besides earning pay of performing your work study is that it helps you make connections with the BC faculty and staff. And I think that's invaluable because they'll help with either providing you information about resources or helping you navigate the BC community. But they also can be references or help if you're looking for internships. It's always nice to have a letter of recommendation from someone outside of the academic side. So again, I can't say enough positive things about work study. And the other positive is any funds you earn from work study are excluded from that EFC calculation on the FAFSA. So it's kind of like, it doesn't count. So if you came to Boston and you worked at Starbucks, that income would count towards the calculation of your EFC. But if you work on campus in a work study job, that doesn't count. So it's not going to be factored in to your next year's aid award. So again, if I haven't talked enough about the positive benefits of work study, that is a huge bonus there. And so at this point, I wanted to open it up to any questions that may be out there. I know that you've been probably sending things in the Q&A, but if there's any questions that I can answer, I'm happy to do so.
Thank you so much, Ebony, for that incredible presentation, very thorough. And I know the students have been reacting so positively to everything that you've shared, adding their questions to the Q&A. So I do want to ask you a few questions that have come up a few times in the Q&A. And I know that we've had some students join a little bit later after we got started. So if you don't mind just reinforcing this information, there was a question about whether BC helps with travel expenses. And I know that you already covered that, but if you don't mind just going over that again in terms of the financial aid award. Thank you.
We don't provide any direct assistance towards travel. So while travel and books are a part of the calculation, so they're part of the foundation of the amount of financial aid we will provide, we do not provide any direct assistance for travel. So students will need to make arrangements to get to campus in the fall, and they'll also need to make arrangements towards kind of going home for the winter break. That's why, again, I encourage that work study, because those earnings can help finance those trips back, because again, they have good pay rates for work study, but no, we don't have direct assistance towards that. However, the Montserrat organization, they do provide information. So again, as a resource, I will again plug Montserrat to talk with them once you're on campus about kind of considerations as it relates to travel, but definitely to get to campus in the fall, students will need to make those arrangements on their own.
Great, and we did add the website to Montserrat's website page, so you can take a look, and all the contact information is on there as well if you have any particular questions, but you can also reach out to us. We can certainly answer those questions for you.
And I just put up our contact information just in case.
Perfect. Thank you. Right on time. There's another question about whether the work study contribution is separate from the 2,400 student summer contribution.
Two separate things. So the kind of minimum student contribution, I guess the best way to think about that is kind of a minimum EFC. So again, when we're thinking about calculating an aid award, it's the COA minus the EFC. Every student has a minimum EFC starting at 2,400 first year, 2,500 second year. So we would take that EFC from the cost of attendance. That gives you your financial need, and that allows us to award you financial aid. Your work study is a financial aid award. So it's part of your financial aid package. And so it's something that's offered to you, and in theory, probably will be offered to you through the 4 years that you're here. And that's an on-campus work opportunity. So they're two separate items.
Great. Thank you so much. The next question is about external scholarships. And I know that, again, you've addressed many of these questions already, but they're the most frequently asked questions that we've been getting in the Q&A. So if you don't mind just going over that again, how are external scholarships used in the financial aid award?
I will say that at Boston College, we welcome students bringing in outside scholarships depending on the amount. So for most students, the average student, let's say they're bringing in, $2,000, $4,000 scholarships. Those can be pretty easily added onto your award. In some cases, we may need to make adjustments to your financial aid award. And so what may occur is that we may have to reduce your work study. That's not our first choice. So first, we're just going to try to add it in lieu of that student contribution. So for some, we may be able to replace that with that outside scholarship, but then we need to move into things like work study. In very rare situations, we may have to adjust kind of our institutional funds, but that's usually for scholarships of a higher value. So if you're bringing in $10,000, $20,000, then yes, as a part of our reevaluation, we may have to adjust some of our funding. But again, that's the rarity versus a common thing. But yes, there can be some adjustments in your financial aid award based on the external scholarships. But depending on the value, it may just be something we're able to add on versus you seeing any kind of impact in your BC award. And we have more about our outside scholarship policy on our website.
Absolutely. Also, a lot of questions about insurance in Massachusetts and whether the state of Massachusetts helps cover the health insurance cost, or is this an individual responsibility for each student to look into this before they get to campus?
I would say definitely before you get to campus, I would look at, and if you go to our website or just go to the main BC website and Google health insurance, there's a page on our student services website. We are a part of a student services team, which includes financial aid, student accounts, the registrar's office. There's a whole page that lists out what your health insurance would need to provide to be considered a comparable, comprehensive health insurance plan. So I would do that research about whether your health insurance will be able to cover you while you're here in Massachusetts, so that you kind of know that off the bat. While again, your aid award is created based off of those standard budgetary items. If you will be required, and again, that may not happen, that discussion may not happen until the fall, but if you are required to take the health insurance and you're trying to have a conversation about resources or opportunities for funding that, again, I encourage you to talk with your financial aid counselor. Those conversations, like I said, should happen closer to the fall, but I would say right now you can at least do the research on whether or not you would have to take our school's health insurance. A lot of policies will cover students outside of the state that they originated. So often students are coming from, New York or Tennessee, and a lot of health insurance policies will cover them if they're out of state, but you should do that research and ask the health insurance those questions. So at least you have an idea for whether or not you'll have to take that cost. But Massachusetts as a state does not offer any type of assistance for health insurance. So it is a conversation you'd want if you do have to take that in the fall come in and chat with your financial aid advisor.
I'm so glad these questions are coming up right now. And I think the students are doing such a great job being proactive and asking these questions. And so continue to be proactive and finding out about your health insurance plan, as Ebony was saying earlier. A couple of questions going back to the work study question that came up. Some students are wondering how many hours a week does that mean in terms of work study? How much money is received at the end of the semester or through the semester that will go towards tuition? And is there ever a chance that there will be a reimbursement back to the student as a result of any additional funding that carries over?
As it relates to work study, the maximum amount of hours you can work is 20. The minimum is really up to you and your employer. So again, most these jobs are on-campus work opportunities. We hire work studies in the financial aid office if anybody wants to come work with us, but their hours are really based on the student's schedule. So that is the beauty of work study, is that it's very flexible because we understand that the student's first responsibility is to be a student. Unlike when you're working kind of outside in the private sector, they're a business. And so they need people there certain times. There's no flexibility, things like that. For work study, they're pretty flexible. If you have a final coming up, you can talk to your supervisor and say, hey, I can't come in this week. They're very understanding. So the minimum that you could work is really up to you and your supervisor. The maximum is set at 20 hours per week. It pays you just like a regular job. So if you work 8 hours that week, you have a set hourly pay rate. Right now, I think most jobs are paying around the minimum wage, which I think is at $14. And again, Melanie or Cara, if you know what the minimum wage is, please put it in the Q&A. I apologize, I don't know the exact rate.
$14.25.
It's what?
$14.25.
$14.25. I was pretty fair. I'm happy about that. So $14.25, and then I think it's set to have another increase. I don't know if it's in 2023. But definitely we're trying to get to $15 an hour. That would be the minimum pay rate. And then each job has its own. So some may pay more. I've heard dining services pays a little bit more than the minimum, but don't quote me on that. But when you're applying for the job, typically the jobs are posted about a week before you're moving in. And when you apply for the job, it'll tell you the pay rate. So it works just like any job. If you work 8 hours, you'll get your hourly pay rate, and that will come to you as a paycheck. We do ask students to sign up for direct deposit just because it makes it easier for them to be paid. And you can use those funds how you see fit. So again, you can use them if you wanted to help pay your costs, so your out-of-pocket costs. But for most students, I say it's a good idea to think of it as your pocket money. So like, you know, if you're here on campus and you wanted to go to the movies with your friends, it can help pay for that, or saving so that way you can get home in the winter, like saving for costs that you have, saving for your books, just all sorts of things. It will help with a variety of those educational expenses. So as far as reimbursement, traditionally, the financial aid award that we're providing would not naturally provide any type of reimbursement, just because, again, it's created by your cost of attendance, less your EFC, all that. So but if you have, let's say, outside scholarship. So again, going back to the example in the presentation, that student owed $2,000 to their bill. That's how much they had to pay. And let's say this student received a $5,000 scholarship. Well, when that scholarship, an outside scholarship, when that scholarship hit their account, since they only owed $2,000, then that means they would have $3,000 in excess. So that is kind of how a student may have a reimbursement if they have kind of other resources that maybe are in excess, but just natively your aid award most likely will not provide that excess. And again, the work study isn't paying towards your build cost, so it is coming as a paycheck.
Excellent. Thank you so much for clarifying that. Just one more question we have here in terms of studying abroad. Many of our Questbridge students want to explore the world. Many of you are coming from all over the world, by the way, not only from the US, but also from all over the world outside of the US. And so they have questions about studying abroad and how their financially package will shift or be adjusted accordingly.
I'm going to have to defer to either Melanie or Cara because I don't want to misspeak about study abroad. So could one of you come on screen to help answer this question?
Yes, so there are two different types of study abroad programs. There's what we call an internal BC program and an external program. So both of those, you still qualify. You work with the study abroad office. You still qualify for credits for both of those programs. However, when you do an external BC program, and this would be discussed when you select your program, you're not eligible for BC grant. You are eligible for BC grant if you choose an internal BC program. So typically we would we would do everything the same. We would apply for aid, we would award aid as is if you're in an internal program. And then we would cover up to the cost of what it would be like if you were to attend BC for that semester. So if the program costs, a few $1,000s more, that might be something you want to think about because it would probably be a little bit of a bigger gap for you, but we would cover up to what it would cost for you to attend BC. So just when those are, we have a lot of our high needs students that do attend these programs. You just have to make sure that you ask questions about internal versus external, and then talk with your financial aid counselor, when you're selecting your program. But we have plenty of students that go abroad, and it's a great opportunity for you. So don't be afraid to ask the questions, and don't be afraid to be able to do that program. So.
Absolutely, we definitely encourage it. Thank you, Cara. And Ebony, if you don't mind coming back on screen as we close this portion of the presentation, we want to thank you. Are there any final thoughts or comments that you have for the group?
No, again, we were very happy to be here. I hope this session helped answer a lot of your questions. But again, if you have additional questions, this is our contact information. This presentation will be made available to you. Just reach out and ask, because that's what we're here for. So do not be afraid to reach out to financial aid.
Thank you so much for being here tonight, Ebony, Cara, Melanie, the entire financial aid team is just fabulous, fantastic presentation. And I know you're going to stick around for the Q&A just to see if there are any other questions are coming up. They'll be monitoring behind the scenes.
Yes, thank you.
Thank you. So now I'm going to share my screen. As soon as Ebony's slides go off the screen, I will go ahead and share the screen. And I want to invite Tyler and Jaleigha to come on screen to tell us a little bit more about EagleBridge, which is the Questbridge Scholars Network here at Boston College. And let me see if I can bring up my PowerPoint. Just give me 1 second. Perfect. Those were such great questions, everyone. Thank you so much for asking and for being so intentional with your questions. Okay, so Tyler and Jaleigha, take it away.
Hey everyone, obviously I'm Tyler and I'm currently serving as Questbridge's first inaugural president on campus. And I just want to kind of explain what EagleBridge is. It functions as sort of a community building organization for Questbridge scholars on campus, while also functioning as a sort of communication between the cohort and the campus administration themselves. So we kind of communicate with admissions, financial aid, and kind of voice the opinions of the students on campus. Is there anything you'd like to say, Jaleigha?
Yeah, I just wanted to introduce myself. I'm Jaleigha Dunlap. I'm the vice president. I was part of the first cohort, so I'm glad you all are here.
Oh yeah, sorry. I'm also a poli-sci major and film studies major, alongside with being a junior on campus this year. So if you guys have any questions about those majors specifically, or just like being on campus for so long, feel free to ask about social life, academic life, having to pay for things, and having to actually go into Boston and explore and see what the city really has to offer.
Thank you, Tyler and Jaleigha. And I know that this was your first year running EagleBridge. Can you tell us a little bit more about the student experience and what you've been able to plan for the Questbridge cohort here at BC?
Yeah, so the student experience, there are a bountiful amount of clubs on campus. Typically, a student would be able to juggle a regular course load alongside like maybe 1 to 3 different clubs, depending on how much they extend themselves. Personally, I'm in 3 different clubs on campus: Mock Trial, Questbridge, and First Generation Club. And I also have 2 work-study jobs that I also managed to juggle alongside my regular course load. It's possible, it's a little bit difficult, but it does work at the end of the day, at least for me. Jaleigha, how's your experience going?
Yeah, it's definitely not hard to get involved at BC. It's very easy. I'm still in my freshman year, so I can't speak to quite the end of it, but beginning, it's not as rough as you seem. Definitely the financial aspect, like that we're talking about today, really scared me when I was a freshman, but just know that the financial aid office is always willing to work with you. It's not going to drastically like be an issue. Like you don't have to constantly worry about money. I know that was a consideration for me as I was going in my freshman year. But as far as life on campus, it's definitely a little bit further out from Boston than I thought it was, at least. But it's not that hard to get in the city at all. And I recommend, if you're interested, learning more about Pulse. I'm in that. It's a little bit difficult to juggle as a freshman, but you have a service aspect along with the course. So that's one of the courses that I would recommend. And also, I'm a poli-sci major at the moment and interested in African diaspora. So if you have any questions about that, let me know.
Great. What are some ways that EagleBridge helps create community for Questbridge scholars at BC? We're getting that question. So I don't know if you can go maybe through some of the programs that you've put together this past year and how you build community on campus.
Yeah, so obviously we are starting brand new. We are in our inaugural year. So we are starting off the ground with nothing, but so far we have had a few events where we have had our first general meeting, which was themed with like breakfast nighttime. And we had a lot of students come in to like play board games, talk to us, learn about who's on the e-board, and see like what the general vibe of the club is, which is very communicative and networking, and really just trying to provide a comfortable atmosphere for students on campus. Alongside that, we also had a themed kind of like Halloween movie night where we had students come and paint pumpkins, since regular pumpkins are way too big. And we also had a hot cocoa night where during finals, students were able to come and like just be comfortable with the e-board and talk to us and like voice the tea about what happened on campus this semester.
Yeah, such fun events. And I know you have many more for the spring. And students are wondering how they can get involved. Are there any leadership roles? Who can they contact? Who can they reach out to?
So to get involved, the e-board is actually having elections at the end of this semester for certain positions. We have 8 positions on the board right now: president, vice president, secretary, treasurer, community outreach, social media manager. I'm blanking on the other couple positions right now, but we are going to have elections at the end of this semester. I would say we probably are going to have a few more positions next year, freshman rep, sophomore rep, a few of those, just to keep in touch with BC culture. But if you want to get in touch and learn about executive board positions, feel free to reach out to me and the EagleBridge Instagram, or ask about it within the GroupMe. I'm also going to tag my Instagram in here so you guys can reach out to me directly if you guys would like to. And I think that's pretty much it.
Great. Definitely get involved, everyone. You know, if you want to create community for other Questbridge scholars and future scholars are coming through, this is a fantastic way to get involved. And you have a lot of support from the university, including our office, of course, with admissions. We also have a question that's coming up here about why you picked Boston College, and also if there has been anything along the way during your time at BC that has surprised you a lot at all.
Jaleigha, do you want to take this one?
Sure. What was the first part of the question? I want to make sure I get this right.
Yeah, why do you pick BC? And has there been anything that has surprised you along the way?
Yeah, for sure. I picked BC. I'll be honest, I wanted to be in the Boston area, and I found that every time I looked up BC, it seemed that it was separate from Boston, but close enough that you could get in the city. So location was like a main factor for me. And as far as like choosing BC, I ranked it pretty high in my list as far as like me being a math student. I picked it, I liked a lot of the, like researching all of the colleges. I liked more of the values and the different way that they do academics. So there's a lot more incorporating service and different things than just purely learning from an academic standpoint. So I liked that a lot. As far as what surprised me, I'll say it's definitely more suburban than I thought it was. And it's definitely a different demographic than I thought it was. It's very interesting. I didn't think about it as a very high Jesuit, like very involved Jesuit institution, but it's definitely a big part of the university and just all of the events that go on campus. So I think that was my big surprise, but there's nothing really negative surprise that you ever will have to deal with, most likely. So.
Tyler, what about you?
I think I guess, most difficult thing for me was social life on campus. When it comes to, I guess, like living in the world that we're in now, it is very difficult to meet people physically in person. And I think a lot of people within our current generation college have evolved to the point of really communicating and building relationships, networking, and friendships through, I guess, like virtual activities. Like instead of like seeing someone in class and asking them to go out to lunch with you, you would rather like DM them, or you would find a way to get their phone number, their email, reach out to them and say, hey, like you had an interesting point of discussion. Do you want to talk about it? Or like, hey, I think you're really cool. You have a really good sense of style. You might want to like grab lunch or something at some point rather than like talking to them. It's difficult to be social at this point in time, but if you're really trying to like build a strong network on campus, I highly suggest reaching out to people.
Absolutely. Yeah. There's so many different ways how students can make friends, whether it is in the classroom or residence halls. And we are on campus, so we're not remote. We're hoping to stay open in the spring and continue to do so for when you come in the fall. Any final words of advice for this cohort as they finish their senior year and get ready to come in the fall?
I would say if you're coming from a warm place like Florida or California, definitely pack winter clothes. I was caught off guard when I came here, but winter is beautiful on BC campus, and it is definitely worth the travel.
Absolutely.
I want to say that I recommend if you're an AHANA student applying to the MLE for your first year. It's definitely helped me a lot. Like I'm not best friends with everyone in my dorm, but it definitely has helped me be more comfortable in an atmosphere. Like everybody is very comfortable with talking about like braiding hair and wearing like bonnets around the halls. It's kind of superficial when you think about it, but living that experience, it definitely makes a difference. So if you're interested, that's the Multicultural Learning Community. So definitely apply for that.
And that's the residential hall here on campus. If you don't mind, Jaleigha and Tyler, just adding your email addresses to the chat, so that way any students who are interested in reaching out and learning more about EagleBridge or any of the tips and tricks that you shared today, they can reach out to you with those questions after this webinar. Thank you so much for coming tonight. And thank you to everyone for tuning in tonight. I know that it is already 8:31, so I do want to be mindful of your time, 8:31 here in Boston Eastern Time. So I do want to share a couple of final resources. You're welcome to take a screenshot of this slide on the screen, and that is our Questbridge email. If you have any questions, we are monitoring the Questbridge email. You can also email us individually. Our contact information is on the website for Boston College admissions. I'm also including the email address for the EagleBridge Questbridge chapter here at BC, as well as a general student email. If you have any questions, we have an entire group of student ambassadors who can answer those questions for you. We are open for visits, and we also have a couple of videos of our campus that you can check out on our website, bc.edu/visit. And finally, phone number to financial aid in case you have any final questions for Ebony and her team. But without further ado, again, congratulations. Thank you so much for joining us tonight. And we'll follow up with you regarding this recording. And we wish you all of the best as you finish your senior year, and stay safe out there. Thanks so much for joining.